What if everything you thought you knew about success was taught to you by someone the world had written off as worthless? Have you ever judged someone based on their appearance, only to discover you were completely wrong about who they really were? This is the story of Charles Monroe, a billionaire who thought he had everything figured out, and Aaliyah, a homeless girl who taught him that true wealth has nothing to do with money. What this billionaire discovered by a playground didn't just change his life. It sparked a movement that transformed an entire city. If you believe that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch, hit that like button right now, because this story will change how you see success forever. Charles Monroe had built an empire from nothing. Starting with a single tech patent in his 20s, he'd parlayed that success into real estate, investments, and a fortune that put him firmly among the city's elite. His mansion overlooked the harbor. His garage housed cars most people only saw in magazines. And his daughter attended the most prestigious private school money could buy. Charles prided himself on being self-made. He believed in meritocracy, that anyone with enough intelligence and drive could succeed. He wrote generous checks to charity galas. His name appeared on hospital wings, and he considered himself a philanthropist. But his charity always came with distance. Write the check, attend the event, go home. He never got his hands dirty with the actual problems his money was supposed to solve. His greatest pride was his daughter, Olivia, at 10 years old. She was bright, curious, and had every advantage Charles's wealth could provide. Private tutors, music lessons, traveled to educational destinations. Charles spared no expense in crafting the perfect life for his only child. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Charles personally picked Olivia up from school. It was one of the few routines his busy schedule couldn't interrupt. He'd arrive in his Mercedes, watch her run across the manicured lawn with her friends, and they'd drive home discussing her day. It was a routine as predictable as it was comfortable. Charles liked predictability. He liked control. He liked knowing exactly what to expect. But on one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Charles's carefully constructed worldview was about to collide with reality he had spent his entire life avoiding. Charles pulled up to Westfield Academy at his usual time, expecting to see Olivia waiting by the main entrance with her usual group of friends. Instead, he noticed a crowd of children gathered by the far playground, their attention completely absorbed by something he couldn't see. His first instinct was concern. Was something wrong? Had someone been hurt? He stepped out of his car and walked toward the commotion, his protective father instincts on high alert. As he got closer, he heard a voice, young, female, patient, and surprisingly articulate. The children were sitting in a semicircle on the grass, completely silent except for this one voice guiding them through what sounded like a math lesson. Charles pushed through the outer ring of students and stopped dead in his tracks. At the center of the circle sat a black girl who looked to be about 15 or 16. Her clothes were worn and ill-fitting, her sneakers had holes, and a small backpack beside her looked like it contained everything she owned. Next to her sat a younger boy, perhaps 7, who watched her with obvious admiration. She was teaching mathematics using pebbles and leaves. So if I have 3 groups of 4 pebbles, she was saying, arranging small stones in neat clusters, how many pebbles do I have total? Her voice carried warmth and genuine enthusiasm. Don't just shout out. Show me with your own pebbles. Make me see it. The children scrambled to arrange their own stones, Olivia among them, completely engaged in this impromptu lesson. Charles watched in stunned silence as this homeless girl, because that's clearly what she was, taught multiplication concepts with clarity and patience that would rival any of Westfield's expensive educators. His mind struggled to reconcile what he was seeing. Homeless people weren't supposed to be intelligent. They weren't supposed to be articulate, composed, capable. His assumptions he didn't even realize he had, were crashing against an undeniable reality. That's right. Aaliyah encouraged a struggling student. You've got it. See? Mathematics isn't about memorizing. It's about understanding patterns. And patterns are everywhere, even in nature. These leaves, these stones, they're all teachers if we know how to listen. Charles stood there, frozen between his prejudices and his growing recognition of something extraordinary. This girl wasn't just smart. She was gifted. Her teaching ability was natural, her way with the children genuine, her intelligence obvious. Daddy! Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts. She jumped up and ran to him, her face glowing with excitement. "Daddy, come meet Aaliyah. She's been teaching us all week. She knows everything about math and science, and she makes it so fun." Aaliyah stood slowly, maintaining her dignity despite the obvious disparity between her situation and Charles's. The younger boy stood beside her, protective and watchful. Up close, Charles could see the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet pride in how she carried herself despite circumstances that would have broken most people. "Mr. Monroe," she said, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm, her eyes direct. "I hope it's all right that I've been working with the children. They were curious, and I love teaching. Comment below if you've ever had your assumptions completely shattered by an unexpected encounter, because what happened next proved that the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers." Charles stood there, this billionaire who thought he understood the world, completely disarmed by a homeless teenager's grace and intelligence. He managed to shake her hand, his mind racing. "How?" He started, then stopped, realizing how his question might sound. "You're clearly educated. How did you end up here?" Aaliyah finished for him, a slight smile on her face that suggested she'd answered this question before. "Life happens, Mr. Monroe. My mother died 2 years ago. My father couldn't cope and left. I've been keeping my brother and myself going ever since. But just because we're homeless doesn't mean we stop learning. The library is free, and knowledge doesn't care where you sleep at night." Her younger brother, Marcus, leaned against her. "Aaliyah's going to be a teacher," he said with absolute certainty. "She's the best teacher in the world." Charles looked at Olivia, saw the admiration in his daughter's eyes as she looked at Aaliyah, and something shifted inside him. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with a check written from a distance. This was a person, a brilliant young person, whose potential was being wasted by circumstances beyond her control. In that moment, Charles made a decision that would change everything. "Aaliyah, could we talk privately for a moment?" he asked. What followed was a conversation that shattered every assumption Charles had held about poverty, intelligence, and worth. Aaliyah spoke about her situation with remarkable honesty. The shelters when they could get in, the nights on the street when they couldn't, the constant struggle to keep Marcus safe, and in school, while pursuing her own education through library books and online courses. But she didn't speak with self-pity. She spoke with determination, with plans, with an unwavering belief that circumstances were temporary, but knowledge was permanent. Charles found himself doing something he rarely did, listening more than talking. And in listening, he recognized something he'd been missing his entire privileged life. Potential existed everywhere, but opportunity did not. "I want to help," Charles said finally. "You and Marcus. I could provide housing, education, support. No strings attached." Aaliyah's eyes widened, but she didn't immediately accept. "Mr. Monroe, I appreciate the offer, but I don't need charity. I need opportunity. If you're offering handouts, I'll respectfully decline. But if you're offering a chance to prove what I can do, then we can talk." Charles felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine respect for someone challenging him. "Fair enough," he said. "Not charity. Investment. In exchange for housing and education, you help tutor Olivia and other students. You share your gift for teaching. We give each other something of value. Deal." Aaliyah looked at Marcus, saw the hope in her little brother's eyes, and made her own decision to trust. Deal. Within a week, Charles had arranged temporary housing for Aaliyah and Marcus in a safe, comfortable apartment. He called in favors from his network, educators who could assess Aaliyah's knowledge, tutors who could fill in gaps, mentors who could guide her toward her goals. But what amazed Charles most was how little Aaliyah actually needed. She absorbed information like a sponge, demonstrated mastery of concepts she'd taught herself, and showed an emotional intelligence that most adults lacked. The transformation wasn't just Aaliyah's. Watching her determination, her refusal to be defined by circumstances, her ability to maintain hope despite everything, it changed something fundamental in Charles. He started spending less time in boardrooms and more time at the foundation programs he'd funded but never truly engaged with. He began seeing the people behind the statistics, the potential behind the poverty, and he realized that his daughter was learning more from Aaliyah about resilience empathy, and true strength than any expensive private school could teach. Olivia and Aaliyah's friendship deepened. They studied together, but more than that, they learned from each other. Aaliyah taught Olivia about gratitude, perspective, and the privilege of opportunity. Olivia shared her world with genuine friendship, showing Aaliyah that kindness existed across social divides. The media caught wind of the story. Some praised Charles's generosity. Others criticized it as performative. But Charles didn't care about the opinions anymore. He was watching a young woman with immense potential finally get the chance to flourish. And he was learning that true philanthropy wasn't about writing checks. It was about seeing people, really seeing them, and helping them see themselves. Within 6 months, Aaliyah was excelling academically. Within a year, she was speaking at school assemblies, sharing her story, inspiring other students from all backgrounds. Her natural teaching ability, given the right platform, touched hundreds of students who saw in her proof that circumstances don't define destiny. If this story is changing how you think about wealth and worth, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because the transformation has only just begun. But Charles recognized something bigger than one success story. Aaliyah wasn't unique in having potential. She was unique in getting the opportunity to show it. How many other brilliant minds were being wasted because no one gave them a chance? How many Aaliyahs were out there, teaching themselves in libraries, dreaming dreams that seemed impossible because society had written them off? That question led Charles to create the Second Chances Foundation. Unlike his previous charitable ventures, this wasn't about writing checks from a distance. This was hands-on, comprehensive, and designed with Aaliyah's input at every step. The foundation identified homeless youth with academic potential and provided everything Aaliyah had needed: stable housing, education, mentorship, mental health support, and pathways to success. But more than that, it provided dignity. It treated them not as charity cases, but as investments, as future leaders whose circumstances had temporarily hidden their potential. Aaliyah became the face and heart of the foundation. She spoke publicly about her journey, not with bitterness about her struggles, but with gratitude for the opportunity and determination to help others find the same chance. Her story resonated across the city, then the state, then nationally. Young people in similar situations saw themselves in her and dared to hope. Wealthy individuals saw Charles's transformation and began rethinking their own philanthropy. Schools started looking differently at students from difficult backgrounds, seeing potential instead of problems. Marcus thrived in his new environment, his own intelligence blossoming with stability and support. He watched his sister become a symbol of possibility and learned that circumstances are temporary, but character is permanent. Charles evolved from a billionaire who thought money solved everything to an advocate who understood that people solve things. Money just removes obstacles. He used his influence to push for policy changes, to challenge systemic issues that created homelessness, to create actual pathways out of poverty rather than just temporary fixes. The foundation helped hundreds of youth in its first 3 years. Success stories multiplied. Students graduating, attending college, starting careers, paying it forward by helping others. The model was replicated in other cities. What started with one homeless girl teaching children by a playground became a national movement. But perhaps the most powerful transformation was in how people saw each other. The community learned to look beyond appearances, to recognize that worth isn't visible in clothing or circumstances, that intelligence and potential exist everywhere if we're willing to see them. 3 years after that fateful Tuesday afternoon, Charles stood at the back of a classroom and watched Aaliyah teach. She was now a college student, majoring in education, but she still volunteered to teach underprivileged children. And she still used the same methods, pebbles and leaves, making learning accessible and beautiful. Olivia sat among the students, now a teenager herself, volunteering alongside Aaliyah. The two remained close friends, their bond forged in that initial encounter having grown stronger with time. Charles thought about that day by the playground, about the assumptions he'd held, about the person he'd been. He'd thought he was successful because he'd built an empire. But watching Aaliyah inspire these children, seeing the ripple effects of one choice to see beyond appearances, he understood success differently now. True wealth wasn't in his bank account. It was in the lives changed, the potential unlocked, the cycles broken. It was in Aaliyah's journey from a homeless girl teaching with pebbles to a young woman inspiring thousands. It was in Marcus's transformation from a scared child to a confident student. It was in Olivia's evolution from a privileged child to an empathetic young woman. But most of all, it was in a lesson Charles himself had learned, that everyone has value. Everyone has a story worth hearing, and sometimes the person you think you're saving ends up being the one who saves you. Like if this story reminded you that everyone has value, regardless of their circumstances. Subscribe for more stories about unexpected connections that change lives. Comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Share your story. Let's celebrate everyone's worth together. Share this with someone who needs to remember their own value. The story of Charles Monroe and Aaliyah teaches us something profound about how we see the world and each other. Charles thought he understood success. He'd built an empire after all. But it took a homeless teenager to show him that true success isn't measured in what you accumulate, but in what you give and who you become in process. Aaliyah's story reminds us that circumstances don't define potential. Intelligence, talent, and worth exist in every corner of society, but opportunity does not. The difference between a homeless girl teaching with pebbles and a celebrated educator isn't ability. It's access. It's someone being willing to see beyond appearances to recognize the person underneath. For Charles, that playground encounter shattered assumptions he didn't even know he had. He believed in meritocracy while enjoying advantages that made his merit easier to demonstrate. He'd practiced charity while maintaining distance from the actual human beings his money was supposed to help. He'd thought he was teaching his daughter about success when really he was teaching her that worth is tied to wealth. But Aaliyah taught them both differently. She showed Olivia that knowledge and kindness aren't exclusive to privilege. She showed Charles that true philanthropy isn't about writing checks. It's about seeing people, investing in them, and trusting them to rise when given the chance. The ripple effects of that single encounter continue to expand. Aaliyah is now completing her education degree, preparing to teach formally. Marcus is excelling in school, following his sister's example. The Second Chances Foundation has helped hundreds of young people find their own paths out of poverty. But perhaps most importantly, a community learned to look at each other differently, to see the homeless person on the corner not as a failure or a statistic, but as a human being with a story, with potential, with worth, to understand that we all have the power to be someone's Charles, to look beyond what we expect to see and recognize what's actually there. Every person watching this has encountered someone they judged too quickly, someone whose appearance or circumstances made them invisible. The challenge is to do what Charles did, to really look, to really listen, to see the potential that society might have missed. Because sometimes the greatest teachers come from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person who changes your life is the one you almost walked past without seeing. Sometimes true wealth has nothing to do with money and everything to do with recognizing the value in every human being. Charles Monroe thought he was successful when he built his empire, but his real success came when he learned to see a homeless girl teaching with pebbles and recognize not a charity case, but a brilliant educator whose only crime was being born into circumstances beyond her control. That's the moment he became truly wealthy. That's the moment everything changed. That's a lesson that transformed not just 2 lives, but an entire city's understanding of what it means to be successful. Because in the end, the pebbles and leaves Aaliyah used to teach mathematics were also teaching something far more important. That wisdom, intelligence, and worth exist everywhere, and our job is simply to recognize them, honor them, and help them flourish. That's the legacy of a billionaire who learned to see and a homeless girl who refused to be invisible. That's what happens when we choose to look beyond what we expect to find and discover the extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Because sometimes the person you think you're saving ends up being the one who saves you. And that's when you realize that true wealth has nothing to do with money and everything to do with seeing the value in every human being.